Completing our scoring of the January 2026 New York State Biology Regents Exam with our final cluster, cluster number 10, which focuses on zebras and covers questions 41 through 45. So we have a little bit of reading here. And then we have a picture of two zebras. And we have a zebra that has a rare coloration with this dark pattern with white stripes rather than the typical zebra coloration. And then question 41 is asking which question would help scientists understand why spotted zebra's coat pattern is different from its parents. So again, here we're focused, the question should be focused on the spotted zebra and why it's different from its parents. So that's important because some of these choices may seem correct, but they're not focused on the inheritance of this pattern. So let's read the choices. Are the pattern differences in zebras the result of heritable variations in DNA between parents and offspring? I mean, that makes sense. That would be a question we could ask that would help us understand the inheritance of these patterns. So we'll keep that on hold, but let's read the other choices. 2, will the spotted coat pattern increase in frequency in the population because the trait is an advantage? This is more about the population as a whole. So this is focused more on evolution and not the inheritance of the patterns. 3, how does the amount of DNA in the zebra skin cells compare to the amount of skin cells of the parent? This isn't really related. The zebra would have the same amount of DNA and skin cells as its parent. That doesn't really help us understand inheritance of these patterns. And 4, does a pattern in the offspring differ from parents because it needs? Again, this is a key misconception. We want to be really careful when we're thinking about natural selection evolution about organisms evolving traits because they need them. That is not correct. Need doesn't cause traits to develop. The trait has to be present initially, and then the environment or other factors can provide pressure that selects for those variations. But the variation doesn't come because it's needed. That's not how evolution works. So be careful anytime you see that word need related to evolution. So question number 41, choice is correct, number 1, and give yourself +1 if you got that correct. Moving on, we're talking about melanin and how melanin produces darker colored fur. We have some descriptions there about the cells in the skin that produce melanin, shows you the melanin is produced in the dark areas, but not the lighter furred areas. So that gives us some information. 42 asks us to describe evidence that would support the explanation that spotted zebras and striped zebras have the same DNA sequence for their coloration patterns. Okay, and so it's asking for us to look at these patterns and provide evidence that would support that explanation. So what would support it is if the melanin produced in both the striped zebras and the spotted zebras was the same type of melanin. And that's what the answer in the scoring guide tell us. I'll look at the examples. Both spotted and striped produce the same protein, or you might say melanin specifically. So the DNA sequence must be the same. Or a simpler answer, since the zebras produce the same protein, referring to melanin, the DNA which codes for it must be the same. Those are both evidence that would support that explanation. So that if you got something along those lines, give yourself +1 for question 42. Then we have some information about zebras and what scientists think may be selecting for different patterns. And so the study that they're being done looks at 2 types of zebras and an impala and how many times flies are landing on these different patterns. The impala is solid colored, and then the plain zebra and the grubby zebra have stripes, obviously. What we see if we analyze the data, we have the different organisms, the impala, the grubbies, the plain zebra, and the number of fly landings. And so it's pretty clear. There are far fewer fly landings on both types of zebras versus the solid colored impala. Okay, so let's look at what the questions are asking. 43, the researchers claimed environmental factors may have affected the evolution of the zebra's striped coat. Which row gathered by researchers justifies why their claim is correct or incorrect? So you have to think about first these 2 things tied together, their claim and then the reasoning behind that, and which ones are matched up correctly to support to discuss this claim that they're making, that environmental factors influenced evolution. So let's read the first one, that claim that the environment did infect it is correct. Flies are more attracted to the impala solid coat, resulting in more flies biting zebras. That doesn't make sense. Okay, that part makes this wrong. Get rid of number one. Number two, that claim is correct because stripes reduce the number of biting flies landing on zebras, resulting in a decreased chance of disease from the flies, increase their chance of survival. Sounds pretty good. Let's continue though. Three, that claim is incorrect. Stripes increase the number of biting flies landing on zebras, resulting in an increased chance of disease from flies and decreasing the zebra's chance of survival. We saw in the data, stripes do not increase the biting flies. They decrease it. That is incorrect. Choice three. And then number four, that the claim is incorrect. Flies are more attracted to the impala solid coat, resulting in fewer flies biting zebras, increasing their chance of survival. Well, here the reasoning looks good. That looks correct. But this reasoning would support the claim. It doesn't provide evidence the claim is incorrect. So these don't match, and that's what makes 4 incorrect. The correct choice in 43, okay, is 2. If you chose 2, give yourself +1 in the margin. Okay. Some more information about the habitat of these zebra and how humans have been impacting it. And so we have 2 different locations studying the genetic diversity in the zebras in 2 places. Etosha National Park, which is larger, okay, and has, if we analyze the data, has less frequency of coat variation. And then we have Lake Maburo in Uganda, which has a smaller population, has approximate frequency of varied coat pattern at 5%. So question 44 is asking which statement best uses this data to predict the variation and distribution of coat patterns for future generations. So again, if we look at the choices, we can eliminate things pretty easily. The probability of finding zebras with varied coat patterns will be highest in Lake Maburo. Is that correct? Yes, that part of the statement is correct. They're more likely to find that variation there because the population there is smaller and isolated. Okay, that is correct. It is the smaller population. Let's keep that in mind. Then let's look at the other choices. Number 2, probability of finding zebras with varied coat patterns will be lowest in Lake Maburo. No, it's higher, much higher in Lake Maburo. So 2 is incorrect. Probability of finding zebras with varied coat pattern will be highest in Etosha. No, it's lowest in Etosha. 3 is incorrect. And number 4, probability of finding zebras with varied coats will be lowest in Etosha. That's correct. Because the population there is small and isolated. No, the population there is larger. So that's incorrect. That leaves us with choice 1, which is the correct answer. If you got it, give yourself +1. Okay, now we finish up here. The last question talks about the zebra population has been in decline, and there are some possible solutions: creating wildlife corridors, using sustainable land use planning, protecting areas, and a little summary of what those things mean. So your task for 45 is to identify one of those. You choose whatever one you want, identify the solution, and describe how it would reduce human impact on habitat fragmentation and benefit the plains zebra population. Again, pay attention to the italicized words, reduce human impacts, and then I describe how it would help habitat fragmentation and benefit zebras. So depending on which one you chose, you would have different answers. If you chose wildlife corridors, you might say joining those areas would allow the zebra populations to migrate, allowing individuals to reproduce together, increasing genetic diversity. Okay, so that tells us how it would impact habitat fragmentation and how it would benefit zebras. You need to do both. Using sustainable land use practices would limit development, would prevent more habitat fragmentation from happening. So we covered that. And then would prevent zebra population from becoming isolated. That's how it benefits the zebra. In 45, the third choice, if you chose protected areas, new conservation areas will not be fragmented, so it reduces fragmentation and allows zebras to have usable land to live and graze. So notice each of these choices referred to habitat fragmentation and benefits to the zebra. So you need to do both of those in your description, just like they did on all the scoring guide examples. So evaluate your answer. If you got it correct, give yourself +1 for question 45. And that is the end of this January 2026 biology Regents. You will have scored all 45 items, and then in the next video, we'll talk about how you convert that into your Regents score.